Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right, greetings and salutations, everyone out there watching this week's episode of Movie Nights. I'm broadcasting from nearby Baja, Mexico. Actually, it's a fun little thing. I was chipping away with Cynthia at our car, trying to get it out of ice, and we were like, we need to escape. And so, as we were talking about that, an invitation flew our way from some of our friends down here who said, hey, they'd like to have a meeting and have a little conference, maybe 2 conferences, and how about we come down? So we jumped on the bandwagon. We accepted that. We saw it as a sign. And so we're going to be here for 3 weeks. And so that's where I'm streaming from. For anybody who's up there in Canada still watching this, jealous that they're chipping away at their car, trying to break it out of ice, I'm so sorry, but I wish you were here with me. And if you're watching and you're in Mexico or nearby and would like to come to our events, let me know. And I'll let you know what those details are on the February 12th and February 15th. We're going to do a geopolitical seminar on the 12th and then something on the 15th. Dealing with the revival of classical culture and a reappreciation of what is the political potency regarding classical composition, both of the Western variation, but of all nations and all cultures and all civilizations, which have certain universal motifs that have emerged at different, better times throughout their history. What are those motifs? What is it that causes a certain cultural, whether a poem or whether a piece of music or a story, to achieve an immortal status that transcends the fleeting, shifting sands of, or the winds of the moment, of the tastes of the day? What is it that allows something to rise to that level and to withstand the changes of the ages? And that question of what is classical, we're going to reappreciate with some concrete examples. We have a women's choir who's coming on down from Tijuana, who's going to be performing. We've got some African-American spirituals. Cynthia and myself will do some short presentations and just open up for a lot of dialogue. So it'll be a fun soiree on the 15th. So like I said, anybody who wants to come down and join us, it's mostly all free. So just let me know. The other thing is we're going to be watching a movie today. And so today I was thinking to myself, there's a lot going on. And for those who watched last week's episode of Breaking History, we spent a lot of time speaking about Canada and, some weird shenanigans, what's going on behind the scenes, especially in regards to efforts by the British Empire to use Canada to try to weaken the Russia-China alliance, as well as destabilize certain activities that are going on inside of the United States. And there's a lot of feedback I was getting. Some people maintained that they believe that Mark Carney, the central banker, prime minister of Canada, is actually on the side of angels, despite what it appears on the surface. He's actually working with the angels on the good side, and whether in secret or what have you. I've encountered many people from different walks who have a similar opinion. I would be very cautious, and I've been following Mark Carney for quite some time. Really, I think I produced my first officially public work analyzing his background, what he represents, what he's devoted to back in 2013. And I would say there's probably, I think I'm right. I think that he's not on the side of angels. And this documentary that we produced some months back, really, I think this was about a year ago, we produced this documentary on Mark Carney's dystopic mission, I think makes the case as well as I could think to make it. Obviously, new developments have happened over the year following the release of this film, but not really a year. It's probably March. I guess we made it in March, so almost a year. So the new developments have happened. Obviously, there's things I would add. I would maybe modify a little bit, but overall, I think the thesis stands quite well. So we're gonna watch that video. If people have any questions, as you know, I like taking the opportunity of these more intimate movie night experiences to field some questions with the live audience. So feel free to throw a question or a thought at me and I'll try to address it. The other thing is, actually, I'll hold back on the other thing for now. But before we do anything, like always, we're going to start with a couple of words from today's sponsors. So we'll begin with Benson Honey Farms. Oops. Welcome to Benson Honey Farms, where every jar is pure gold. Benson's Honey is excited to be back on Badlands Media with their latest 2025 honey harvest, straight from their farm in Nebraska. While they've been busy working to improve our state politics from the ground up, they never forget the importance of sharing the best honey around. Did you know that honey isn't just a sweet treat? It's nature's medicine, perfect for alleviating allergies, soothing upset stomachs, or as a delicious natural sweetener for baking. Benson Honey is never heated, ensuring you receive it in its pure, raw form full of natural goodness. At Benson Honey Farms, quality and purity is a top priority, and they're committed to providing the finest honey from the hive to home. Join the supportive community and enjoy a special offer. Visit badlandsmedia.tv/honey and use promo code BADLANDS for 15% off of your purchase. Benson Honey Farms. Savor the authentic taste of Nebraska and support this American first business. Follow on Facebook at Benson Honey Farms. Okay, and then we've got here, I believe it's Badlands Shop. Here we are. All right, so happy New Year, Badlands family. Let's kick off the golden age with unstoppable action. As your favorite Badlands show wraps up, dive right into the Badlands Shop, where they've curated top-notch sponsors and exclusive deals just for you. From premium USA-made health supplements and grass-fed meats to bold patriotic apparel, secure tech gear, and veteran-owned coffee, we've got everything to power your America First lifestyle and crush those New Year's resolutions. Whether it's on-air spotlights or daily essentials, shopping here is easy, smart, and impactful. Every dollar you spend fuels freedom, backing patriot entrepreneurs, family businesses, and creators who share our values. You're not just getting great gear, you're strengthening the movement that keeps Badlands Media thriving. Thank you for supporting businesses that support Badlands Media. Head over now to badlandsmedia.tv/shop and click shop on the main menu of badlandsmedia.tv. All right. So I think without further ado, we're going to now watch a film. So get your popcorn ready, sit back, relax, enjoy. I hope you find this entertaining and educational. And like usual, as a disclaimer, we are streaming this from YouTube in this particular instance. If there's any glitches, I do sincerely apologize, but let me know in the comment section if things are flowing okay, and I'll try to fix any issues if I can, if they come up. So enjoy the movie.
Now that Mark Carney has been officially installed as the Prime Minister of Canada, the decision to replace Justin Trudeau with a much more vicious technocrat can only be understood in the light of the historic role of the British Empire in using Canada as a weapon against Canadians and especially against Americans. In the 19th century, Canada was recognized as a principal enemy of the USA. Confederate intelligence had enjoyed vast patronage and support by the British Empire through its web of intelligence bases in Montreal and Toronto. These Confederate intelligence networks not only coordinated terrorist operations against the Union from the north, but additionally paid and directed John Wilkes Booth to murder Lincoln after the war's end. These facts were outlined in detail in Barry Sheehy's brilliant 2017 book, Montreal, City of Secrets. After Cecil Rhodes's Round Table was founded in 1902, it became a driving force in shaping imperial grand strategy to recapture the lost colonies of the Americas and to establish a world federation under the City of London. From 1907 through to 1952, it used Canada to incubate hundreds of Rhodes Scholars who then infiltrated the USA. This fact was exposed by American journalist Eugene Griffin in the 1951 Chicago Tribune article titled, "Canada Offers Fine Field to Rhodes Wards."
British-educated Canadians are in a unique position to serve Britain through Canada's influence on Washington. As a next-door neighbor of the United States, Canada acts as a connecting link between England and the United States, helping to hold the neighboring republic in line with the Dominion's mother country. When General MacArthur displeased Britain and Canada by his efforts to win the Korean War, Canada's Oxford-educated Minister for External Affairs, Lester B. Pearson, complained that American-Canadian relations had become difficult and delicate. MacArthur was fired the next day. Pearson's Foreign Office staff was packed with Rhodes Scholars. There were 23 among 183 staff officers, or 1 out of every 8, who were educated at Oxford University on the scholarships created by Cecil Rhodes, empire builder and diamond mogul, who wanted the United States taken back into Britain's fold. Other Canadian Foreign Office members also were educated in England. Pearson went to Oxford on a Massey Scholarship endowed by a Canadian millionaire.
This was a career path that would be very familiar to Mark Carney. As the informative 2010 LaRouche Pact documentary A Special Relationship is for Traitors showcased, during the early 20th century, leading American military figures like Brigadier General Billy Mitchell understood Britain's role in supporting the Confederacy and Britain's manipulation of global wars. General Mitchell fought against the special relationship tooth and nail and led the U.S. military to create War Plan Red and War Plan Orange to defeat Britain in the context of an eventual war between the two English-speaking powers. These plans became official U.S. military doctrine in 1930 and were crafted in response to Anglo-Canadian plans to invade the USA that had been drafted 10 years earlier, known as Defense Scheme 1. Despite the misleading name, even the most ardent anti-American historians admit that these plans were entirely offensive in nature, as no prior U.S. plan to invade Canada then existed. War Plan Red was only taken off the books when America decided it was more important to put down London's fascist Frankenstein threat than to fight Britain head-on in World War II. The Green Agenda's infiltration into U.S. foreign and energy policy considerations was also driven in large measure by the influence of Canada's Maurice Strong from 1963 to 1980. Strong oversaw a vast reorganization of the Liberal Party, even bragging to his biography Elaine Dewar in 1994 that he was on the selection committee that brought Fabian Society agent Pierre Trudeau into politics in 1963. From 1965 to 1967, Strong ran Canada's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, founded Canada's International Development Agency CIDA, transforming the philosophy of international aid from assisting poor nations to build full-spectrum economies into predatory borrowing tied to conditionalities. He also mentored a young Klaus Schwab, co-founded the World Economic Forum in 1971, chaired the first UN Forum on Population in 1972, served on the Bilderberg Group's steering committee, and crafted a worldview which became known as the Green New Deal, and Agenda 21, launched at the Rio Summit in Brazil in 1992, which he also chaired. Today, the spiritual heir of Maurice Strong and the Round Table movement has been set up to take dictatorial control of Canada under the suggested threat of a climate emergency. This spiritual heir of Maurice Strong and the Cecil Rhodes legacy is, of course, Mark Carney. Goldman Sachs man Mark Carney has become known as the eco-warrior of central bankers, a title celebrated by Politico in 2019. Over the course of recent years, he has endorsed the UK's Financial Stability Board's Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, which was created in 2015 and used as a guideline for the UK government's July 2019 white paper, Green Finance Strategy, Transforming Finance for a Greener Future. The Green Paper proposed to
consolidate the UK's position as a global hub for green finance and positioning the UK at the head of green financial innovation and data and analytics, endorsed by institutions representing $118 trillion of assets globally.
The Carney-led task force also spawned the Green Finance Initiative in 2016, which is now a primary vehicle designed to divert international capital flows into green tech. Carney's former employer, Goldman Sachs, has also created a green index for virtuous investing, including a new sustainability index to promote heavy investment into green infrastructure called CDP Environment EW. The acronym CDP originates from the Climate Disclosure Project, a London-based think tank that generated Goldman Sachs' program. Goldman Sachs' Marine Abiad promotes the CDP index, saying,
"We are convinced that sustainable finance enables financial markets to play a virtuous role in the economy."
No doubt they are. Under the influence of Mark Carney and King Charles, the Bank of England and some of the dirtiest banks in the Rothschild City of London web of finance have promoted green financial instruments, led by green bonds, to redirect pension plans and mutual funds towards green projects that no one in their right mind would ever invest in willingly. The Ecological Social Governance Index, or ESGI, has now been set up across 51% of Germany's banks, including the derivatives bomb waiting to blow, namely Deutsche Bank.
Hello, I'm Anna. I'm a graduate at Deutsche Bank. You have to be able to create a lasting and trusting relationship with your clients.
Deutsche Bank sits on top of over 42 trillion euros in derivatives, making it the most contaminated and bankrupt of all the speculative banks in Europe. Derivatives today amount to over $1.2 quadrillion in fictitious capital and represent the greatest threat to the world financial system. Originally designed simply as a form of insurance for farmers, derivatives were transformed into creative financial instruments by former J.P. Morgan banker and later Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan in 1987. Instead of making a real systemic correction to reverse the deindustrialization and financialization of the world economy, Alan Greenspan had a different idea. Junk bonds that had formerly been considered illegal in the early 1980s were made the driving force of the world economy in this detachment of economic value from real production. Unpayable debts, mortgages, and insurance on securities, commodities, and other non-tangible assets came to be considered as assets that could be gambled upon using high-frequency trading. Money literally started making itself, while the real economy continued to stagnate and atrophy. By 1992, derivatives accounted for approximately $3 trillion of nominal value, and by 1999, they had grown to $70 trillion. With the destruction of Glass-Steagall regulations under an Oxford Rhodes Scholar president named Bill Clinton, the last regulation that had kept speculative finance separated from commercial and savings banking was destroyed. In the post-Glass-Steagall era, derivatives ballooned to $700 trillion across American and European banks, representing over 10 times total world GDP. With Glass-Steagall destroyed, federal insurance was granted to speculators who would now gamble with commercial banking, resulting in the plunge into the age of too big to fail. Banks now knew that regardless of their illegal gambling, they could always rely on taxpayer bailouts if they failed. Among the most exposed too big to fail banks are Deutsche Bank in Europe, which now has over 42 trillion euros of derivatives exposure, and Mark Carney's former employer, Goldman Sachs, whose derivatives exposure as of 2024 was $54 trillion. As the head of the Bank of International Settlements Financial Stability Board from 2012 to 2018, Mark Carney directly oversaw the growth of this international time bomb. Leading bankers supporting the ESGI like Mark Carney, have said that over 6.5 trillion euros could be mobilized under this new index, an amount estimated to grow to 50 trillion by 2030. But how could such money be generated for a global green banking reset, you may ask, when no money seems to be available to provide for adequate hospital care or even basic infrastructure for the population? Is it possible that those who orchestrated the growth of this financial time bomb, such as Mark Carney, are also counting on a new system being forced onto the world after a period of pain? On top of this, the creation of green bonds, which Carney has promoted, runs hand in hand with the bail-in mechanisms which have now been implemented across the transatlantic nations in order to steal trillions of dollars from pension funds, savings, RRSPs, and mutual funds the next time a bailout is needed to prop up the too-big-to-fail banks. After all, they now sit atop a nearly $2 quadrillion derivatives bubble just waiting to blow. The driving force behind the creation of this dangerous international bail-in regime, which became law across Europe and North America, and which professed to avoid bailouts by simply stealing the deposits of savings accounts during future banking crises, was, of course, Mark Carney. At the highest echelons of the Bilderberg Group, which orchestrated the Western systemic collapse, that citizens would likely rise up in opposition to the abuses of the Wall Street and London banking cartels. A distraction was needed. Thus, we shouldn't be surprised to discover that major controllers of the loudest anti-establishment movements today are directly affiliated with the same imperial controlling hands that carefully manufactured this world crisis to begin with. Take the case of the UK-based Extinction Rebellion, which has attempted to call for not only the total abolishment of major banks, but of industrial civilization itself. Leaders of the Extinction Rebellion have called for the total decarbonization of life on Earth, extreme forms of Green New Deals, and ironically, depopulation. All outcomes conveniently desired by Mark Carney and his associated technocrats in London. Just in case you thought Extinction Rebellion was somehow untouched by the hand of social engineers, Alex Evans, a leading figure behind the movement, was a former consultant on Prince Charles's International Sustainability Unit and co-author of the U.S. National Intelligence Council Global Trends 2025, A Transformed World, which became an environmental foreign policy blueprint for the Obama administration in 2008. Currently, Evans also runs the Collective Psychology Project, where psychology meets politics. Other leading British intelligence figures managing the Extinction Rebellion movement included Farhan Yaman and Sam Gale of Chatham House, the controlling institution behind the New York-based Council on Foreign Relations. Chatham House is overseen by its president, Mark Carney. How much of a rebellion can it really be if the rebellion is set up by the establishment? The oligarchs running the grand green design since the Club of Rome's Sir Alexander King began the Limits to Growth study in 1970 knew that green, low-energy flux density sources of energy would inevitably constrict global population. And that is exactly what they wanted. Sir Alexander King said as much in 1991 when he wrote in the preface of The First Global Revolution.
In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it is only through changed attitudes and behavior that they can be overcome. The real enemy, then, is humanity itself.
As World Economic Forum trustee and architect of the Green Agenda, Mark Carney has worked closely with King Charles in announcing the Great Reset Agenda and the King's Sustainable Business Initiative set up in 2020.
We have a golden opportunity to seize something good from this crisis. Its unprecedented shockwaves may well make people more receptive to big visions of change. Global crises like pandemics and climate change know no borders and highlight just how interdependent we are as one people sharing one planet.
He worked closely with Lynn Forrester de Rothschild in setting up the Council on Inclusive Capitalism, which partnered with the Vatican in 2020. As Prime Minister, Carney has alluded to Canada's owners not wishing to join the USA.
Having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale.
He has also made it known that he wants King Charles to take a more active role in shaping Canada's identity, even inviting the King to open the Parliament of Canada by delivering the throne speech, the first time a sitting monarch has done this in nearly 50 years. But who is Mark Carney really, and who does he serve? Who are the owners of Canada to which he refers? The people or other forces? To understand Carney, we must go back to the vision that shaped him, one born not in Ottawa, but in London in 1877. That year, Cecil Rhodes penned a manifesto calling for the extension of British rule throughout the world, and ultimately, the recovery of the United States of America as an integral part of the British Empire. His instrument would not be military conquest, but an elite managerial class trained in British institutions, funded through the Rhodes Trust, coordinated by a small array of think tanks, and spread across the globe as ideological missionaries. In his manifesto, Rhodes outlined the basis of the Rhodes Scholarship program that would soon be created, saying,
"Let us form the same kind of society, a church for the extension of the British Empire, a society which should have members in every part of the British Empire working with one object and one idea. We should have its members placed at our universities and our schools, and should watch the English youth passing through their hands. Just one, perhaps, in every 1,000 would have the mind and feelings for such an object. He should be tried in every way. He should be tested, whether he is endurant, possessed of eloquence, disregardful of the petty details of life, and if found to be such, then elected and bound by oath to serve for the rest of his life in his country. He should then be supported, if without means, by the society, and sent to that part of the empire where it was felt he was needed."
This was the genesis of the Round Table movement. Built by Rhodes and continued by Oxford-trained acolytes such as Lord Alfred Milner, Philip Kerr, George Parkin, Leo Amery, and Lionel Curtis, this invisible empire sought to entrench British dominance through education, think tanks, and financial power. In 1920, Milner's network birthed two of the most powerful institutions in modern global governance: the Royal Institute of International Affairs in London, also known as Chatham House, and its American counterpart, the Council on Foreign Relations, what Hillary Clinton would later refer to as the mothership.
I am delighted to be here in these new headquarters. I have been often to, the mothership in New York City.
As an Oxford-trained former president of the Royal Institute of International Affairs, Mark Carney is their spiritual descendant. His language is urgent. Climate, crisis, carbon. But behind the facade lies a more dangerous version. In Carney's world, governments obey central banks. Carbon quotas become currency. Energy use becomes behavior, and behavior gets tracked, scored, and taxed. This system is not new. In 1933, a group called Technocracy Incorporated proposed a North American technate ruled by engineers, not by elected officials. Their vision included replacing money with energy credits. eliminating elections, and monitoring every human action through a centrally managed data regime. The Canadian head of this movement was Joshua Haldeman, the maternal grandfather of Elon Musk. Prior to running Technocracy Inc. in Canada, Musk's grandfather led the Saskatchewan branch of the Fabian Society's Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, which was designed to solve the Great Depression by imposing a scientifically managed society, according to the group's Regina Manifesto. This organization was itself created in 1931 by 4 Rhodes Scholars and 2 Oxford-trained Fabians, with one member who would go on to spearhead the creation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and another who would manage Pierre Elliott Trudeau at the Privy Council office in Ottawa. Pierre Elliott Trudeau was himself trained by Rhodes scholars like William Yandell Elliott and initiated into the Fabian Society under the tutelage of the London School of Economics' Harold Laski. These ideas, control through cybernetic systems, management through data feedback loops, permeated Canadian political life throughout the 20th century. In the 1960s, the Quiet Revolution gutted Christianity from Quebec and replaced it with a new secular order built on systems control and a new technocratic elite, sometimes with French names, but always loyal to British imperial influence. Quebecois Rhodes scholars such as Jean Beetz and the creator of the Quebec Ministry of Education, Paul Gérin-Lajoie, worked closely with Pierre Trudeau at the Université de Laval under the influence of Dominican Grand Strategist Georges-Henri Lévesque, where they oversaw this transformation of Quebec governance and culture. Upon being elevated into the position of Prime Minister, Pierre Elliott Trudeau unleashed a wave of cybernetic restructuring throughout the federal government. This included the creation of Environment Canada and the Canadian Club of Rome in 1970, which set the stage for reforming the entire Canadian governance system around a logic of adapting to limits. Among co-founders of this agency, along Trudeau, were Rhodes scholar Roland Michener, then Governor General of Canada, Maurice Strong, Rhodes scholar Alistair Gillespie, and Oxford-trained Mark Lalonde. Rhodes scholar George Grant, grandson of Rhodes Trust President George Parkin, and uncle of the later Liberal Party controller Count Michael Ignatieff, called it the creation of a universal and homogeneous state, a system where technocrats rule and identity is erased in the name of global governance. Mark Carney and his circle operate in this same tradition. His wife, Diana Fox Carney, is a senior fellow at Canada 2020, the Privy Council think tank that groomed Justin Trudeau and advanced the agenda of North American integration. That same think tank was founded by Privy Councillors John Manley and Thomas Axworthy, both of whom helped draft the 2005 Task Force report calling for a North American Union, adopting a single currency modeled on the euro, a harmonized regulatory regime, and an unelected class of managers ruling across borders. These objectives were never abandoned. They were merely delayed, and today they are resurfacing with new force. The same figures who now speak of climate resiliency also champion militarized continental defense, the so-called Golden Dome missile shield, supported by both Carney and Trump, envisions integrated military control across North America, which falls into direct line with the early Technocracy Inc. agenda for centralized military control over the technate. Elon Musk's X project aims to replace traditional banking with a global digital currency platform, tied not to gold or to increasing productive forces, but rather to behavior. The dream of a North American technate, long dismissed as fringe, is being rebranded for the 21st century. While Canada integrates ever more deeply into the control grid of England and the Crown, President Trump has even indicated his openness to accepting King Charles' offer to rejoin the British Commonwealth as an associate member, saying, "I love King Charles. Sounds good to me." Does Trump understand that this is no game, but that a trap has been set which does not involve turning Canada into a republic or joining the USA, but risks having the USA fall into the British Empire? Certainly, Trump's endorsement of Mark Carney's Liberals in the 2025 election and his tendency to think of the British Crown as something separate from the British deep state, which worked so hard to sabotage his first term in office, indicate some fatal blind spots. But none of this is possible without memory loss, without erasing the fact that these ideas were born in the minds of imperial strategists who never forgave the loss of their American colonies. Amidst the carnage of World War I, Canada's Lincoln-admiring Prime Minister Wilfrid Laurier, who had just been unseated in a soft coup, wrote,
"Canada is now governed by a junta sitting at London, known as the Round Table, with ramifications in Toronto, in Winnipeg, in Victoria, with Tories and Brits receiving their ideas from London and insidiously forcing them onto the respective parties."
By the 1940s, even President Franklin Roosevelt warned that his own State Department was infiltrated by men who worked for Winston, British agents operating inside American governments. After FDR's untimely death, the agents of the British Empire moved quickly to create an Anglo-American special relationship premised around turning the USA into an imperial enforcer of London's drive to conquer the world. Sir Winston Churchill stated that the post-war world would be controlled by British brains and American brawn. As nuclear bombs were dropped on a defeated Japan as a show of force to all nations of the world still aspiring to independence, Harry Truman and Churchill signed the US-UK Signals Agreement, establishing the Five Eyes surveillance complex and advancing Rhodes' plan for reabsorbing the USA into the British Empire. Highly placed agents of the British Empire took control of the UN Charter, drafted the NATO Treaty, established UNESCO, created the World Health Organization and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which took control of all educational programs of the Western world during the Cold War. Institutions of global rule emerged rapidly, many authored by men who bore the Rhodes seal. S. Scott Reed designed NATO. Dean Rusk orchestrated America's foreign wars. J. William Fulbright established the basis of modern globalization. Everywhere you find technocracy in action, a Rhodes Scholar is nearby. Mark Carney brings this legacy home. He offers no policies shaped by democratic input. He brings frameworks, tools, and scorecards. He speaks the language of sustainability, equity, and modernization, but behind it lies the same goal: rule without consent, rule by expertise, rule by empire. We are told that this is progress, green, inclusive, smart. But beneath the language of virtue lies a system built to manage people like resources and to penalize any society that resists assimilation into a singular imperial order. This is not governance. It is conquest wrapped in the rhetoric of compassion. Mark Carney is not a break from the past. He is its careful continuation. His pledge of allegiance was not to the people of Canada, but rather to the crown and the heirs of King Charles.
I, Mark Carney, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty, King Charles III, King of Canada, his heirs and successors. I shall keep secret all matters committed and revealed to me in this capacity, or that shall be secretly treated of in council.
His disdain for democracy and commitment to systems of hereditary control is visceral, and while he has been rebranded from a cold central banker to a champion of freedom against evil American imperialism, his core identity has remained unchanged. Carney's mission can be found clearly expressed as the fulfillment of the dream of Cecil Rhodes to create a church for the extension of the British Empire and reacquisition of the colonies of the USA. This agenda has involved the slow infiltration of the USA and Canada by generations of agents of empire committed to the overthrow of sovereign nation-states, the undoing of the experiment of 1776, and the establishment of a global control grid under the influence of a renewed technocratic British Empire. Of course, there is still time to turn this ship around and revive the best traditions of the USA amidst the systemic breakdown crisis now underway. There is nothing stopping nation-states from imposing Glass-Steagall bank separation at any time to break up the bankrupt, too-big-to-fail banks before the time bomb blows. Nation-states have the authority to erase the unpayable debts and reorganize the system according to truly human values which increase abundance for all, while encouraging international peace through cooperation with other nations which don't want World War III. There is still time. But without an awareness of this history of the Rhodes-Milner legacy to revive a worldwide empire, and without a knowledge of these traps that have been set in our path, then any freedom movement will be doomed to fail.
Okay, all right. So that was the dystopic mission of Mark Carney. And I hope people found that at the very least educational. There's certainly, a lot in there, a lot of history. And I think it's something that a lot of people often overlook is the question of what is if we acknowledge that there is still an influence of the British Empire in and around the world, we know that the British Commonwealth still is a force internationally. The major money laundering centers, the offshore bank, havens are still located in British Commonwealth territory, as they were in the days of the more official British Empire. And we know that very, very strategic think tanks have been built up and that maintain a centralized means of intercommunication and projection of power. But what does it look like? What are the forms? What are the origins? What have they done? Who are the representatives? These are questions that I don't think very many people have taken the time to analyze, evaluate, and then take ownership of. There have been a few that are exceptional. And I saw somebody, I think it was Matthew Trump in the chat earlier on, comment that Carol Quigley was one of those few scholars who did a good mapping. And I agree with Matthew's observation. He wrote, "We are in Carol Quigley territory big time. He did the tireless research to prove the existence of the hidden Anglo-American establishment." And that has been a very valuable resource for my own research over the years, is Quigley's work on tragedy and hope, and especially his Anglo-American establishment. It was the name of a very small but very useful book published posthumously. I don't think he wanted it published while he was alive. And if you read the book, you'll kind of get a sense of why he wouldn't necessarily have wanted that. However, he was also a gentleman who, as a teacher in a Jesuit-run college, was one of the mentors of Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton even endorsed his Tragedy and Hope, which for me is a peculiar thing and makes me wonder, are there possibly certain Trojan horses or limited hangouts infused into his overarching narrative that has a lot of usefulness? Yeah, there are. But that being said, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Carol Quigley's work is very, very useful indeed. just going to scan through here just to see if there's any other questions that pop up. Unfortunately, when I screen one of these films, as people know, I can't necessarily see the comments while the video is playing, so I'm making up for lost time now. Generally, a lot of approval. That's good. Matthew wrote another comment saying the key to the success of the Rhodes long-term program was to have an American ultimately in charge from 1945 until the rise of global governance. Yes. And then something that didn't really come up in this particular composition, though in future sequels I could see this being infused as a useful aspect, is the Pilgrim Society, which is something that, again, plays into the British Roundtable operations and the Fabian operations, which are sort of, they've always worked together. You know, the Fabian Society was set up in 1884 as a nominally socialist London imperial think tank designed to attract the poor, the downtrodden, the unions into something more controlled to express and redirect their revolutionary urges against empire towards something which ultimately was manageable by those very same imperialists who were out to destroy them in the first place. So you had that working together with the Round Table, with its Oxford Trust or Rhodes Trust operation through Oxford. One was through the London School of Economics, the other one was through Oxford, and they would work always together over the years. And so, you know, it's the other aspect was one of the agencies, a very elitist agency created when William McKinley was murdered, was known as the Pilgrim Society. And that's something which was in 1902, set up first in England, and then a junior branch inside of the US designed to advance Anglo-American integration. And of course, the leading families, when you go to even their Wikipedia site, they're very open that it's those very same leading banking families that were setting up the Federal Reserve, who were early on full members organizing this Pilgrim Society. The Aldriches, the Rockefellers, the Warburgs, there's many others who played a role. The JP Morgan groups, JP Morgan family has always been a major Pilgrim family, sometimes called the Helpers, you know, the Society of Helpers that would assist in the ultimate infiltration and growth of this toxic foreign agency within America in order to ultimately reabsorb it. In more recent years, some of the leading members included Henry Kissinger, who ran this thing for 20 years in the 90s, 2000s until his death. George Shultz, others were leading members. Tucker Carlson and his father were also members in their scanned booklets that somebody was astute enough to scan and make public those Pilgrim Society membership lists that included Tucker Carlson and his own father some years back that have circulated and gone viral online, which I appreciate that somebody did that work. Just reading here. Just scanning through here. Somebody wrote saying, I think, can't quite show this comment for some reason. I think Rhodes scholars are required to be psychopaths. Maybe. I mean, there's definitely an epistemological warfare thing. And I think the thing with Rhodes scholars is that it doesn't necessarily make you a bad person. Like, I don't think, I've used this example on a number of occasions, but I don't think Chris Christopherson, the singer, actor who passed away a few years back, I don't think he was a bad guy. He was a Rhodes Scholar, though. And I think part of it was that he had certain expectations to be a manager, to have big responsibilities in political science and in the political world when he came out of Oxford. And I think he was just honestly disgusted by the evil that he saw, and he didn't want to play that role that was expected of him, and he chose to break free and play a different kind of role in the entertainment sector. So was he necessarily a bad guy? I don't think so. Some people can break from their mold, but it definitely, if you are a Rhodes Scholar, the chances are you are going to be on a very short list to be vetted to play a role in higher things. And of course, those higher things will be you'll do a better job of advancing those tasks if you let go of your conscience, your morality, and adopt a much more sociopathic identity. That does seem to be the case as well. So I have hope for everybody, that everybody can redeem themselves and to give up their wayward ways, but a Rhodes Scholar who's that far down the rabbit hole in a bad way, or the snake hole, is they have a lot going against them. Let's just say that they have a lot going against them, and that includes people like Chrystia Freeland, our former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, Chrystia Freeland, who is currently a special advisor to Zelensky. That includes her. So Keith wrote, I think they choose men and people who have no strong father figure in their lives. They are very groomable. That's an interesting hypothesis. I haven't looked individually at the personalities and the bios of the Rhodes Scholars, but I wouldn't discard what you just said. I think that's very likely. And then Matthew, Mr. Trump, says not everybody in those organizations had to be a player in the way we think. Those guys wanted to have cool musician friends in their circle. They wanted to have power and to be hip. That's true too. That's true too. Good point. And indeed, there's a lot of power in culture and who controls the levers of culture. So again, you raise a very good point. I take that in and accept the possibility that Chris Christopherson might have still been advancing, perhaps in a different way, the agenda of the Rhodes Scholars. And we know that people like Aldous Huxley is a good example of somebody who was of one of these higher families, had a lot of expectations put on him. His father was Leonard Huxley, a leading controller of the British Eugenics Society and Eugenics Movement International for the British Empire. His father, the father of Leonard, the grandfather of Aldous, was none other than Thomas Huxley, the controller of Darwin, the leader of the X Club, the founder of Nature magazine, which still exists, and somebody who, again, played a very vast role, a major role in shaping the structures of imperial science as a false science that we all had to pay fealty to, effectively as a new religion, a secular kind of religion called science with a big S, rooted in certain Darwinian axioms and assumptions. So that was a big responsibility that was granted to Thomas, and the whole family was given a sort of dynastic privilege because of the work and accomplishments, albeit evil ones, of Thomas. And the kids born into such a family have really, again, you feel kind of bad for them. Julian Huxley, Aldous, others, their brother Matthew Huxley, I think his name was Matthew Huxley, but their brother, who's often forgotten, who committed suicide when he was a young man, because in the family estate, because the strain was so great to be, to walk in the footsteps, the big shoes that you had to fill of Thomas Huxley. And it drove him nuts. Julian Huxley as well, who the founder of UNESCO and the father of modern conservationism, the brother of Aldous, was going through electroshock therapy to deal with his emotional baggage, because he was expected to do horrendous things and learn how to like it. And he did. He ultimately did the job, but didn't seem like he liked himself at the end of the day. And Aldous was actually writing how relieved he was that he got sick and lost most of his eyesight, like 95% of his eyesight. He was nearly blind. And he was relieved because it liberated him from many of the expectations to be a controller of science, because you couldn't do real science. And this is something Cynthia, through her work on Aldous Huxley, has taught me, and she read many of his letters, that you couldn't do real science if you didn't have eyesight. And then that gave him more liberties to go and pursue an influence in the cultural scene, promoting, of course, LSD, drugs, psychedelics, psilocybin mushrooms as part of the new sacred experience to form the new generation being born after World War II. Basically, most of the baby boomers, as well as writing many of his fictional novels, again, in the realm some falsely believed was entertainment, but it was never entertainment. It was always designed to have a great power, and some might say even greater than the power and influence enjoyed by his brother Julian Huxley, or many of the leading bankers and oligarchs, because it would, while they would act on an important material plane, Aldous and people of his ilk were acting on the psycho-spiritual plane, the cultural plane, that would have influence long, long, long after they die, potentially centuries, if not millennia, if people don't get smart. That's the type of influence that the cultural operators wield. So again, very important observation, not to discard. But Matthew did point out that he loves Chris Christopherson. I appreciate Chris Christopherson too, and I really do hope he's cool. Elizabeth writes 5326. Aldous Huxley definitely had seen some difficult things. Yes, he had. And what they do to kids in Eton, however they call it, where they break young men, young boys before they're going to go on to the higher level Ivy League schools is horrendous. You hear the stories told secondhand, and it's awful what young elites are expected to be put through as young horses to be broken of their humanity in a number of horrific, sexual, painful, psychological forms of abuse, which is just mind-bogglingly bad. Keith writes, O'Higgins, that never trust a Fabian. I never trust a Fabian. I thought he was always trying to break up Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello. I actually don't know those cultural reference points, but I'll do my homework. I'll do my due diligence after this, so I'll be ready next time Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello come up in a conversation. All right. Well, yeah, I think with all that said and done, I don't really have the means of scanning through many of the comments that had popped up. Some poll 99 is really scattering a lot of garbage in the chat, though. That's like 30 consecutive messages that are rather impolite. Gotta figure out a way to ban that figure. I guess it's a bot. I've seen a lot of those before. So yeah, I think the important thing as well is to just hold in mind that there is this, like, the Wilfrid Laurier quote was something as well that I thought was useful to throw in there towards the end, because Wilfrid Laurier was one of the few. There are a few cases of political leaders in Canada who went off the reservation and stood for their humanity, and he was one of the few. And his comment after he was ousted from power in 1911, describing how Canada is now run by this organization called the Round Table that runs both parties, the Grits and the Tories. That's the Liberals and the Conservatives back then. Those little names given to them, but that's essentially what he was talking about. That was an extremely important observation that was made, and he made that in 1916. So Canada had already been pulled in to support the empire in this completely unnecessary thing called World War I. He was in large measure trying to keep Canada out of these enmeshments, to try to build up even though we were a dominion of the empire, he was still trying to do his best to create a sovereign decision-making capacity within Canada. It was very difficult, of course, being part of an empire and just being a pseudo country. But he was also he was a great admirer of Abraham Lincoln, as well as McKinley. And he had this idea of creating, and he devoted many years to organizing for this free trade policy with the United States, but not a free trade policy like NAFTA, which was designed to hollow out and destroy our industrial base. But it was a different philosophy, much more akin to the idea of the free trade enjoyed amongst the United States within themselves, that were based upon an idea of mutual development with a protective tariff around a combined US-Canada union. So that would involve encouraging manufacturers, industrial progress with big projects that people like Lincoln had fought for, that Wilfrid Laurier was a great fan of, the idea of building more expanded rail across Canada into the Arctic as a way to really, as he said in 1911, where he envisioned a Canada of 60 million people by 1930. We don't even have anywhere near that today in 2026, but that's what he was envisioning over a century ago. So that type of quality of vision was something that the oligarchy has been afraid of, and it was only expressed a couple of more times in positions of high influence in Canada, one of which was with the figure of Diefenbaker. Another was who was a conservative ousted, a progressive conservative prime minister ousted by Rhodes Scholars, like James Coyne, who was the Rhodes Scholar governor of the Bank of Canada in 1963. He was fired by Diefenbaker for not allowing for the government to use the national bank as a national bank to fund and build a recovery out of the recession of 1957 to 59. And instead, he went renegade, and Diefenbaker actually fired him, and he went to war and created a major operation with other Rhodes Scholars around Diefenbaker to, basically force Diefenbaker to resign, a la Nixon. You had C.D. Howe, who was sort of the minister of everything and built up Canada's, industrial base in a big way during and after World War II. Our nuclear power sector, our hypersonic jets, the Avro Arrow, a lot of the rail and hydroelectric projects, but were built up under this guy's management. He also had to deal with keeping the Rhodes Scholars as at bay as humanly possible, though it was not always possible. And really, that was pretty much it. When Diefenbaker was taken down the same year they took down JFK, it was largely this Fabian thing, manipulating Canada internally and globally, like represented by people like Maurice Strong and others. So that is very much part of the stain that is Canada's history. We actually had maybe one decent person in 1986 by the name of John Turner, who did try to fight against the idea of destroying our manufacturing base under NAFTA. He did fight that. He was a prime minister for 6 months. But whether he failed by design, maybe he was witting, I'm not too sure. It sounds nice what he was saying. But he was also a Rhodes Scholar who was in Pierre Elliott Trudeau's cabinet earlier on. So maybe he was a case of a Rhodes Scholar breaking from the reservation and being a human, or maybe he was just playing a controlled opposition, perhaps. Possible. I don't know. But that's something that people could possibly, if there's researchers out there that want to pull on a thread, that's one for you to pull on. Keith writes, Matt, I'd like to know when and by who moved the seat of financial power to Ontario versus Ottawa, diluting any Quebec money power. I'm guessing you meant to say to Toronto versus Ottawa, since Ontario is the province in which Ottawa is found. And Toronto is sort of the seat of financial power. But it's been, as far as I know, Montreal and Toronto have been the two financial centers of Canada. Bay Street, as they call it in Toronto, is sort of the Wall Street of the United States, sort of analogous. It's always been run by a network of a small coterie of too big to fail banks. And that's been the case since the 19th century. So unlike the US, which has a different banking culture that encouraged a lot of small local banks, there's thousands and thousands of local banks as part of the US culture. And the too big to fail system was a relatively recent aberration, perversion of banking that was relatively recent in the American experience, made possible only through the types of deregulation and mergers and acquisitions and universal banking policies and practices made possible under Reagan, but then in a big way under Bill Clinton, who took down Glass-Steagall, again, Rhodes Scholar. That's something which has always been there in the case of Canada. So we've never, it's not a new thing that we have too big to fails. That was always the case. And the rotation, the rotating door, the revolving door between directorships of these banks and insurance companies like Sun Life, the biggest insurance company in Canada, and the federal government has always been a fluid flow of in and out. So there's not really been much in the way of patriotic banking, whereas I could say in the case of the US, we do have a tradition, albeit a suppressed tradition, of patriotic banking, constitutional banking practices, utilizing things like Hamiltonian banking, the concept of emitting productive credit through the use of national treasuries, not the Federal Reserve, but rather legit treasuries that would be then tied to a debt that would be associated with a project or many projects that would be built up by providing loans through different corporations that would be either in full or partially owned by the nation, and that would provide the means, like we saw with the Tennessee Valley Authority or the Hoover Dam Coalition, like all of the different agencies that were created. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation was another corporation that was basically the state, but that was designed to provide for the general welfare and the common defense as outlined in the Constitution, and that through things like the Reconstruction Finance Corporation was, we saw that used to provide loans direct loans to businesses, to people, to individuals, but especially businesses, to carry out the task of building the various many tens of thousands. I think there was like 47,000 projects under the New Deal as that, were made possible through these types of means of funding. We had earlier on the Abraham Lincoln Bank Acts of 1862, 1863, that gave renewed a type of national banking practice that gave rise to investments of the industrialization of the North, the building up of the transcontinental railway, and a lot of the efforts for Reconstruction, though many were sabotaged. There were beautiful ideas for industrial development, for Reconstruction of the Confederate South that never had industry, they never had manufacturing, for obvious reasons. They like to make money off of slave labor at a low energy, a low technology level. And so those plans to industrialize it were short-lived. And when Lincoln died, most of those plans were abolished. And that's a sad thing. So I'm just clicking. Oh yeah, and as far as the Quebec money power, you have oligarchies in the oligarchs in Canada are very old. They're very old, but not that old at the same time. A lot of them came to prominence, in the wake of the American Revolution. The English-speaking ones, at the very least, who were loyalists, British Empire loyalists, who didn't agree with the principles of the U.S. founding fathers, and chose instead to escape, to leave, and stay loyal to the crown, and were given territories up in British colonies in Ontario, or Upper Canada as they called it back then, and some in Lower Canada too. So you had some pre-existing families from the French Jesuitical oligarchical class of feudal lords. They were called the seigneurie system, the feudal system that treated human beings as ignorant talking cows under the control and ownership of a lord. That was what was the system of Canada, of Quebec, French Canada. And those families, the highly vetted families, many of them came from like the House of Orleans, the House of Anjou. Some of them did have direct continuation. There were what you might call cadet families or branch offs from these older nobility houses who were well placed and who continued to enjoy influence even after the English came out victorious against the French during the 7 Years' War in 1763. But they continued to enjoy influence and worked in harmony, in tandem with their English counterparts, their English higher up families that remained empire loyalists. And some of them were given the name. They were given the name of like the family compact, for example, is one name. The Laurentian elite is another name of the Quebecois elites. The family compact was a name that was given to the Ontarian English-speaking high-up families in the 1820s, 1830s. And that's what people like William McKinley, the Republican Canadian former mayor of Toronto, organized as his rebellion against the British Empire. It was him who coined the term family compact, because it was ultimately these inner families that would have a compact that worked together, that he tried to overthrow, but he failed because he was not well organized. But yeah, there is an opposing tradition. There is something in the credit. So you do have credit unions. That is the one positive type of Canadian banking that you will find is something like, there's Van in British Columbia. You've got credit unions there. You've got a certain culture of credit unions built up in the early 20th century in Quebec. The Caisse Desjardins is a credit union like that originally was designed to get out of or around the too big to fail London-controlled banking networks, and instead provide direct credit for the development of farms that were desperately in hunger of having some long-term reasonable credit at common sense, low moral interest rates. And they were not being given that. So this was created as a way to build up the real economy of Quebec. Unfortunately, over the 20th century, and especially during the Cold War, many of these credit unions have become just other instruments of imperial finance integrated into the machine. There's a few that are still standing, but very few. So, somebody just asks, did I miss something? President McKinley here. I don't understand that question. Maybe I'm missing something else that was said in the chats. Here, I'm just going to bring up here Elizabeth's question. At one point in 2020, I think I came across one of the founding documents of Canada that defined them as a colony of the United States. Has anyone else come across this? No, I've done a lot of work on the founding documents of Canada in the 1860s. I've looked at the Acts of Union of 1840, of the original 1791 Confederation. It's sort of a proto-confederation, pseudo-constitution in Canada, and the British North America Act of 1867, which is still in effect. And nothing comes even close to that. If anything, it's described as a colony of the British Empire, or as a dominion of the British Empire, or as a state or a confederation devoted to promoting the interests of the British Empire, is quite literally what it says in our British North America Act 1867 preamble. The idea of any official documents saying that it's defined as a colony don't exist, not of a colony of the United States, at least. There's also the Treaty of Westminster that transformed the Dominion status into a nominal nation status, but not really, because it was a nation, but still where the elected part of the government had no real role to play in decision making. It was still the head of state is effectively still a crown, and whoever is wearing that crown, and the institution of the crown, which is much bigger than the personality of whoever happens to be wearing that thing on their head at any given moment. Since we have a privy council, we have lieutenant governors, we have a privy council office, which is vast and mostly, none of it is elected. You have governor generals, who are the official head of state representing the power and influence of the position of the crown, signing off and giving royal assent or royal descent if something is deemed to be offensive to the interests of the empire. That power still is reserved to the governor general and the entire machinery to veto and not give assent to a particular law that might be voted upon by those representatives of the people. So it's not really a country in that sense, unfortunately. And this might trouble some of my fellow Canadians who might be listening, but that's the way it goes. You got to take the good with the bad. You got to, medicine is not always going to taste good. Keith says that King Charles can still shut down Canadian Parliament and send soldiers to war. Yes, correct, Keith. That is part of the prerogative powers. That's known as the prerogative powers of the Crown, which people thought was a bit of a conspiracy theory until 2003, when I think it was the London Guardian produced an article outlining what those prerogative powers are and making them public, and people were somewhat shocked that these were active powers that were still there to declare war, to do an immense amount of things by the position of the Crown itself. So yes, prorogue Parliament is another one that if there's a vote of no confidence, those who in the opposition parties in a government within the Commonwealth might again try to force an election, but it doesn't mean that an election has to happen. They still have to get the approval of the governor general. So they're going to be begging the next day after they declare no confidence to the governor general to say, please let us approve our request to have an election. And the prime minister, who will be challenged with that vote, will also be at the governor general's office representing the Crown, saying, please don't approve an election. Let me stay in power. And that's exactly what we've seen on a number of occasions, including in 2009. So that's a thing too. And again, my big fear, like I said, and I've been very open about this, and I know it offends some people, but that being said, I think things that are offensive or that are concerning should be spoken out in polite society, and we'll let reason and evidence ultimately determine whether hypotheses are right or wrong. But my hypothesis, as I outlined in this video, is that a long-standing trap has been set that ultimately will have the U.S. potentially, especially maybe destabilized through an economic blowout, slip and fall into a trap set by the British Empire. Maybe that inflames an idea of a restoration of Teddy Roosevelt Monroe Doctrine thinking in a good way. Maybe those intentions are noble, but I think that that another trap is there. And if we're not aware of that trap, I think the slip might happen, especially with the idea that the North American Union was something not that long ago that was put on the table, by the same think tank, or the leaders of the same think tank that produced Justin Trudeau, that produced Mark Carney. Canada 2020 is the name of that think tank, set up in 2003 as a Privy Council project. And several of those leading Privy Councillors who set up that think tank that shaped so much of Canada, as well as Barack Obama and the behaviorists in the United States, also designed the North American Union with the idea of an amaro, a singular currency that would be brought online once the current financial system of 2007 could be shaken up and destroyed. Something new would be created, and a lot of them are still there. These ideas, I don't feel like it's different enough from some of the stuff that I've been seeing more recently about getting Canada to join the US. I'd like to think otherwise. I'd like to think that I'm wrong, but I suspect that I'm not. So we'll see. Keith says, so the Governor General can abolish Alberta independence. Well, this is the thing, right? It's could the King of England abolish the American independence? I mean, maybe according to the legalese, the legal languages of the British Empire prevalent at the time of 1775, 1776. Yeah. But the question is, what are we abiding by? Are we abiding by natural law, the law of God, or some man-made arbitrary law that justifies the continuation of empire? And the Founding Fathers had a pretty good way, a pretty good philosophy, and allowed them to approach that question in a healthy manner. Same question I think would apply today. Of course, if an Alberta independence movement, which does exist, it's robust, it's growing in popularity, if it's going to thrive and be successful, let's say we have a referendum, and let's say that referendum turns out in favor of independence. Well, that doesn't mean independence happens, because that's still other things. That just means that the fight is taken to the next level. Of course, if it gets into a legislative act where a bill is introduced calling for separation, well, yeah, the lieutenant governor of Alberta has the right to veto that bill. The question is then, do you abide by the lieutenant governor? If you want to do as a province a deal with another province or with another country like the United States, you kind of need to have legally Ottawa's approval. That has to be at the table. They will block it. Carney will block it. So then what do you do, right? We're entering a new kind of domain at this point of like, how do you approach dealing with natural law in a way which minimizes damage and destruction, right? Which can be done as ideally as peacefully as humanly possible, but that is aware of the lengths and depths to which this evil will go to keep its systems of control in play. So definitely important. Elizabeth says she'll go back through the documents, and if she finds it, she'll send it. Thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate that. So okay, I think we're running up to the top of the show here. I'll keep on looking through the comment section, but I'll play our last ad of today's or this evening's event before I do that. So let me just go back to the there it is. Where is it? It's a Badlands. It's a soft disclosure one, I think. Yeah. Soft disclosure lotion. Here we go.
I don't say this lightly. This lotion changes people.
My knuckles would actually start to crack. Started using the soft disclosure lotion, and I am very impressed. Even within just a few days, I've noticed a tremendous difference.
That's not a script. That's what happens when something actually works.
It puts the lotion on its skin, or else it gets the hose again.
Yeah, that line keeps coming up. Because when you don't use it, your skin starts acting up.
Every single ingredient in soft disclosure is intentionally chosen. There's no filler ingredients. It is not like this BS product where they have a bunch of ingredients. Every ingredient listed is for a purpose.
Over 65-star reviews for the lotion alone. Not influencers, not actors, just people whose skin finally shut up. Soft disclosure lotion. Once you try it, you'll understand why people won't stop talking about it. Visit softdisclosure.com and use code BADLANDS and get 10% off.
All right. Let's see. Of course, the default mic. I just realized every time I show a video and then go back to my video, it default relapses back into my computer's microphone. And so if people have detected a lower quality of my voice, that's why it happens. And I'm often not on the ball. I don't notice that shift occurs, and I apologize. I'll try to be better. So yeah, I think we've done a pretty good job here. Got some appreciation for the history lessons, and I do my best. There's also, for those whose interest and curiosity is piqued, I think my audience is mostly American, I believe. I know it's mostly American. There are some Canadians who watch this. But if you're interested, I did a series of books over 10 years called The Untold History of Canada. It's volume 1, 2, 3, and 4. Volume 1 was actually written by an old mentor of mine, it had Benjamin Franklin on the cover, and it's called The Tragic Consequences of the Quebec Act of 1774. And the whole question of why was Benjamin Franklin in Canada? Why was he here trying to organize for Canada to become the 14th colony? That whole story is told in great detail, including many heroic Quebecois farmers who fought with Washington and disobeyed the Jesuit and Anglican controllers of Quebec, who were trying to threaten and intimidate people to remain loyal to the crown. So there are some heroic stories there too. But that's volume 1. Volume 2 deals with the 19th century and the Canada aspect of the deep state buildup, including the murder of Lincoln and including the creation of this synthetic country as a wedge to prevent U.S.-Russian collaboration, especially after the Alaska was purchased by the Americans from the Russians, and Canada played a certain role in that. So that whole story is volume 2. That's In Defense of Manifest Destiny is the name of that particular book. Volume 3 is Our Forgotten Struggle for Progress, dealing with the World War I to World War II up until 1970 period, as far as an outline of all of the great patriots who did fight to advance and liberate Canada from the system of empire, many of whom ended in tragic ways because we never properly identified what this deep state was. It does look at the Rhodes Scholars, but then volume 4, Caught Between Two Systems, has Cecil Rhodes, Lincoln on the cover, representing two different ways of looking at the world. And then in the front, you have Franklin Roosevelt and Churchill, again, representing those two opposing paradigms on how the post-war world should be wired. And that book, again, tackles the entire Fabian Rhodes Scholar complex and how it completely perverted and shaped, Canada specifically, but the world as a whole. So that those 4 volumes are not too big. They're available for anybody. They're up on Amazon. They're up on my website, CanadianPatriot.org, for those who like to read. It's good bedtime reading material and might get you to appreciate what this weird thing is above you in the north in a little bit more detail. Because I think that a lot of Americans don't properly appreciate what the hell this thing is called Canada. They just don't know. It's a confusing thing. Got mostly English speaking people who look and have a similar culture, watch The Simpsons, watch hockey, just like a lot of Americans do. But there's something else going on, and you got to look at it. You got to really understand it if you're going to be able to fight, because that's the thing that caused many American patriots, followers of Lincoln, of JFK, by not properly understanding it, they got the rug pulled out from under their feet. I've just seen way too much of that. And Matthew Trump says, I just bought. Whoa, hello, Matthew. Matthew Trump just bought my book. Will be a great addition to my library and fill some holes in my knowledge. Thank you, Matthew Trump. Appreciate that. All right. And then Elizabeth also says, just putting out some endorsements here, The Untold History of Canada. We'll read this. Thanks, Matt. All right. And Lion of Britain says, I was late. What film did you show? Well, you'll find out later. Don't worry. You'll enjoy it. And Truth Frequency says, hey, a fellow Canadian. All right. Truth Frequency is a Canadian and has this series. Excellent. And for Americans, after I did that, just so you know, there was also The Clash of the Two Americas, volume 1, 2, 3, and 4. So once I felt that I did as much as I could to reconstruct Canadian history, I was like, okay, let's take the same exercise and apply it now to reconstructing the U.S. history, the U.S. experience. So we have volume 1, 2, 3, and 4 for the Untold History of Canada series too. The Clash of the Two Americas as well. So that's a fun little two sets of histories that overlap and dovetail. And where can they be purchased? About the lovely secret societies. That's what Line of Britain asks. Where can I purchase your books about the lovely secret societies? You're referring probably to the Revenge of the Mystery Cults trilogy that I published last year. And that's easy to find on Amazon, Revenge of the Mystery Cults with my name, or simply go to CanadianPatriot.org and you'll find those 3 thick volumes there as well. And Cynthia's book on Freemasons, Jesuits, and anthropologists, how the ghost dance religion was created to basically create a new type of religious engineering process with the Smithsonian in the 19th century in order to get the natives to exterminate themselves, pretty much. And it's something that they then tweaked and applied and infused into many different, very different Christian denominations, Pentecostal and others, over the 20th century, which is a crazy story. So Cynthia's book also, if you're into secret societies and some of their methodologies, her book is a good entry point as well to wrapping your mind around a lot of that. So we're almost at 7:30. That's 7:30 Eastern time. So I will use that as the last word. Thank you everybody for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the movie. Hope you share the movie. Go to YouTube, go to my CanadianPatriot.org site, or just go to the comment section and you'll find a link to the actual video on Rumble, on YouTube, and share it, rewatch, share it, try to get more of these things out there, and also make a donation. We are always fundraising to make more of these videos. Jason Dahl and I got to put, if I had a hat, I'd take it off to Hugh Trudeau, who is the incredible narrator, the voice that you were listening to in today's film. That was just, Hugh Trudeau has done an amazing amount of work narrating my first book as well as this documentary. And I'm just always blown away. So thank you so much, Hugh Trudeau. Thank you, Jason Dahl, as well, for the amazing work that you've done putting these films together. And we'll show another one next week. So without further ado, I'll leave it to the outro video. Take care.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.